Good afternoon. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. As part of the Miami University Alumni Association's webinar series, today we present Paper Science and Engineering, Miami's role in the future of the pulp and paper industry. Joining us for today's conversation are our panelists, Dr. Beena Sukumaran, Dr. Keith Hone, Dr. Gary Rudemiller, as well as paper science alum Bob Fieser and current paper science student Madeline Holthouse. Dr. Beena Sukumaran is Dean of Miami's College of Engineering and Computing, previously serving as Vice President for Research at Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey. She received a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the College of Engineering in Trivandrum, India, and a master's in civil engineering from Auburn University, and earned a doctorate from Purdue University. Dr. Keith Hone is chair and professor of the Department of Chemical, Paper, and Biomedical Engineering at Miami University. He received his PhD in chemical engineering at the University of Minnesota in 1999. He then joined the Department of Chemical Engineering at Kansas State University, where he worked for 20 years before his move to Miami in 2019. Dr. Hone's research interests are heterogeneous catalysis with emphasis on energy applications. I'm glad you are doing that, Keith, and not me. In particular, he has researched the conversion of hydrocarbons and alcohols to hydrogen and catalytic processes for converting biomass to fuels and chemicals. Dr. Gary Rudemiller is a 1982 graduate of the Paper Science and Engineering program at Miami University. He attended the Institute of Paper Chemistry, subsequently renamed the Institute of Paper Science and Technology for his MS and PhD. During his 30-plus year career in the paper industry, he's held positions primary in paper operations from paper machine superintendent through VP of operations. He participated in the Paper Science and Engineering Foundation in various volunteer roles since 1995, eventually serving as president from 2011 to 2013. Since 2017, he has served as the foundation's executive director. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Just a reminder to our viewers, questions were collected during the registration, and our panelists will address some of those throughout the webinar today. You'll also have the option to ask questions during the webinar by clicking Ask a Question under your video screen. Please note that in the interest of time available, we may not get to every question, and today's webinar will last about an hour. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Beena to get us started with the panel. Welcome to you all. Thank you, Beena, for joining us.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you for the introduction, and it is my pleasure to be here. This is actually a second in the series. We did one around systems analysis earlier. And paper science is actually our oldest engineering program in the college. So I'm very happy to be here. And I know we have attendees all the way from 1963 graduates to the present. So welcome. And I wish we could see you, but we can't see you here on screen. But it's a pleasure to have you here. I'd like to introduce our other two panelists here. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hone and Mr. Rudemiller to introduce. So Keith, would you like to introduce Madeline, please?
Yeah, sure. Very happy to. When we were putting this panel together, and the thought was a student, it was pretty easy to think of Madeline. She's a fabulous student, very engaged. Happy to share her opinion and her impressions, and she's going to graduate next spring, class of 2022. Madeline, is there anything else you want to say about yourself?
No, I think you covered it. I can share my major if that's relevant. I'm majoring in chemical engineering, and I've got minors in paper science, process control, and digital game studies, actually. So I'm super happy to be here today. Very excited to share my opinions and give input.
Awesome. Thanks, Madeline. And Gary, I'll let you introduce Bob.
Thank you, Keith. Bob Fieser is a 1984 graduate of our paper program. When he came to Miami, he was interested in chemistry, but shortly thereafter moved over as an engineer. And once he graduated, his career took off. He spent many, many years with Westvaco, which ended up through various mergers becoming part of WestRock. and where he served most recently as president of their consumer packaging division, I think it's called, Bob. And he retired almost 2 years ago. But for the last 2 years plus, he has been president of our foundation, the Paper Science and Engineering Foundation. And Bob, I'll ask you to take a second to add anything you'd like to the brief introduction.
Thanks, Gary. I think you covered it very well. I had a wonderful 35-plus year career in the paper and packaging industry, most of that with WestRock. So a quick shout out to my WestRock friends who might be listening in. Mike Brown, if you're on and watching, good to see you, and I hope you're watching. But I had a wonderful career. Did a lot in operations, sales and marketing, and general management roles, and had a chance to run a number of the companies, and also a lot of international experience in Brazil, India, and China as well. So very much looking forward to the panel, and it's been wonderful for me to serve as president of the foundation over the last 2 years.
So since we have two alumni of the program here, between Bob and Gary, I wanted to hear from the two of you about the origins of the Paper Science and Engineering program, how it started at Miami, and what your experience was like going through the program.
Well, Bob, if you don't mind, I'll talk about how the program came to be, and you can add your experience to that as well.
Sure.
The Miami Valley, from the Cincinnati, Dayton area, used to have very, very strong presence of paper mills along all the rivers in the area. So there were a lot of paper companies back in the 40s and 50s in the area. And back in the 50s, a number of the paper companies in the Miami Valley banded together to form an educational program to ensure that there were talented engineers coming into the industry for their needs. And this program ended up being situated here at Miami. And C. Edwin Brandon, who was a longtime professor of the program, you can see him at the bottom left of that faculty photo there. He started the program, and for the handful of years was the only professor in the program, and he ran the program for a number of years single-handedly. I think Bill Gutzweiler in that photo ended up being the second professor. And from there on, it took off. So the program started at Miami in 1957. The first graduating class was 1961. And since 1960, when the foundation started there has been a mutually beneficial relationship, a partnership with the industry and the academic program here at Miami. So the paper industry has been invested since 1960 from the early days of this academic program to support it and ensure that talented young engineers come into the program then to source the need for the paper industry. Now, over the years, many of those companies in the Miami Valley area are no longer here, but Miami students will go all over the U.S., wherever the jobs may take them. So it's been a good relationship, and the role of the foundation is to ensure that it stays a good relationship. I started there in 1978. I came to Miami on an Evans scholarship, and the Miami representative who came to my high school said, if any of you are interested in science and engineering, you ought to consider this. And I was taking an accounting class in my senior year at high school, and I knew that finance wasn't what I wanted to do. So I ended up enrolling in paper science and engineering. At that point, pulp and paper technology, and the rest is history. Spent over 30 years in various manufacturing roles in the industry, and I can honestly say that the academic program there, the support of the professors, the support of the industry was a real difference maker in my life and in my career. Bob?
Thanks, Gary. I had a similar experience as well. I think, as Gary indicated in my intro, that I actually started as a chemistry major. And I was contacted after my first semester by the chair of the department and asked if I wanted to just come and maybe take one class in paper science and engineering, which I did, and I loved it. I just really enjoyed the environment, loved the professors, how hands-on and engaged they were with the students, and kind of the rest is history. I just remember maybe just a couple of comments about my memories of the program. It was extremely rigorous. That's one thing I did remember. It was not easy, but it was also a lot of fun. At Miami, I was involved in a fraternity on campus, but also I had my paper science fraternity as well. And it was a lot of great teammates. We did a lot of fun things with cookouts, the local tappy meetings, and plenty of study breaks uptown. That's kind of my memories of all of that. And it's just, it was fun, but it was also very, very challenging. But at the same time, I always knew that the professors that were involved in the program were incredibly supportive of the students and always had their best interest at heart. And certainly were very instrumental in my career and direction overall. So great and fond memories of the program.
Well, I can see from that level of engagement that alumni have with this program that you are very fond of it. So, and you know, as you think through this and thinking about how the paper science and engineering program has evolved over the years to its current form, which is the chemical, paper, and biomedical engineering program with the paper science minor. So can some of you, at least and Keith, Gary, and Bob, can you talk about the evolution of the program over the years? I think, Gary, would you start? And then Keith can talk about the present.
When I started in 1978, it was called Pulp and Paper Technology. And Bob, I suspect when you started, it was called the same thing.
It was.
But even before I left, I think it switched to paper science and engineering to better reflect the engineering component of it. A few years after that, it became paper and chemical engineering when we brought chemical engineering into the School of Engineering and Applied Science. And then a few years after that, it became chemical and paper engineering to reflect the emphasis on chemical engineering because there are quite a few chemical engineering students coming into the school. And then finally here, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it became chemical, paper, and biomedical engineering. So the guts of the program around paper started as Pulp and Paper Technology and has evolved over time. You may recall, Bob and I both graduated with majors in paper. Okay, my major was paper science and engineering, and I suspect Bob's was as well.
Yeah.
But today we don't have that major anymore. The academic coursework for paper science and engineering and chemical engineering were very, very similar. So the decision was made for various reasons to get rid of the paper science and engineering major, have it be a minor, and now chemical engineers and mechanical engineers and electrical engineers, if one ever decides to do so, can take the paper engineering coursework and receive a minor in paper engineering. And the industry has received that very well. There hasn't been any heartburn over students from Miami not being majors in paper because they have the engineering skills that are requisite for anybody going into a paper process engineering role, and they have the paper engineering work through the 5 required courses there. So quite an evolution, but the students who leave here today are very capable.
Yeah, I can pick up on a little bit on what Gary talked about. For those of you who graduated 20 years ago, if there's some alums in the audience, it's a very different place. It's paper was it, right? That was the department. That's no longer the case. It's now kind of one of 3 specialties of the departments. With the chemical and biomedical engineering, paper is a third, and it's not a major where the other 2 are. So that's a different place. The number of faculty has changed. You see the package picture that Gary showed. Those are all paper folks. Now we have kind of 3 people. Doug Coffin, Steve Keller are kind of the primary paper people. Sorry. And Kathy Almquist was around with the old timers, the really core group that you see in the black and white photo. She knows most of those people. She works in environmental, so she has applications there. And she loves the paper program. I'll tell you that. So it's a different place, but I think, the students are still getting a quality education. It's not as deep as in paper as it was. It's not all, the curriculum had to be, made smaller because of going from major to a minor. But what our goal is to provide them with a deep experience in chemical engineering or mechanical engineering, so they can come from either discipline, and then they get some specialization in the paper. So they get enough to get started, but we hope that they can build on that because they have the other skills, whether it's chemical or mechanical engineering that they can make use of in the industry. So I'm guessing there's probably a little more training on the job with our students than maybe in the past, but I think they have lots of other skills that they bring to bear on the program. I will mention one thing. So we do have what's right now is a paper engineering minor. It's a handful of courses you have to take. Most of them are in the chemical engineering program, so you just have to take some specialized paper courses in chemistry, paper physics, paper making. We're just starting a paper science minor. So it's for people like Bob that were chemistry majors and maybe didn't know about paper. We're going to have a special minor for them because our minor right now is not very easy for a science major to take. They have to take a lot of engineering courses that they really don't have the background for, and so they have to take the prerequisites, and you can imagine. But with the paper science minor, they're going to be able to get into the program much easier, and so we think we broaden the number of students that can come into the program. So we're excited about that.
And before Bob speaks, if I could just add, Keith referenced Kathy Almquist. She's included because she was part of the paper program years ago, and Keith said that she was very supportive. I will say that we have is it 12 professors, Keith, in CPB?
15 with a 16th coming in the fall.
Okay, and I will tell you that many of the students who end up in the paper engineering minor are there because one of those professors has suggested, go check out paper. So the professors, though they're not associated with the academic program, are very, very supportive of getting students to come in and check out the paper engineering minor. We very much appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that the only thing I would add is that Gary and Keith talked a lot about how the program's evolved and where it is today. The one thing that I think has remained constant is that we've got this wonderful engineering program inside of Miami University with this rich liberal arts history and the opportunity for our students to take advantage of that as well. So the graduates of this program within the industry are often very well known and distinctive in terms of their leadership skills in the industry. So we like to believe that Miami grads tend to set themselves apart in terms of their leadership skills and ability to work in teams effectively.
So that's a nice segue to Madeline, because we haven't heard from Madeline. And I know, Madeline, you have an internship that's coming up very soon in the paper industry. But I wanted to ask you about why you chose this minor and, and why you're choosing to go into this industry. And would you encourage other students to follow in your path? So anything that you can speak from a student perspective, especially.
Of course. So I came into Miami and I knew that I wanted to do chemical engineering. So that was kind of where I started. And then from there, as we have discussed, there were 3 choices for me. So I could go environmental, bio, or paper. And so I knew I was not going to go bio. That has never been my specialty. So it was kind of between environmental and paper. And I had heard a lot about the program. My parents are actually alumni from Miami. And so they said, this is the program. We've heard so much about it. And they are not engineers themselves, but they had heard about it and, how great it was. And so I said, yeah, why not? So I took my very first course. I took CBB 201, my first semester, my freshman year, with Dr. Keller, and it was difficult. I would say things have not changed. It is still a rigorous program, but I got so much from it. And I really felt like it was such an enriching experience because while I was being supported in the classroom and I was learning all these great new things, I was also being just as supported outside the classroom. And so my freshman year, it was, I had been on campus for 3 weeks and I was already networking with companies and getting to meet representatives and making connections with students who were older than me that had gone through this process before. And so I think kind of the most substantial thing that I feel about this program is that I feel so incredibly well supported. I feel like anything that I can set my sights on or anything that I want to do, this program will help me achieve, which is just it's amazing. I feel so fortunate to be a part of such a wonderful program. And so that's kind of how I got into it. I can speak more on that, or if you have any other questions about the program and how it is now.
So Madeline, could you speak about, what you will be doing this summer and if you
Yes.
had any previous internships with the paper industry?
Yes, so kind of going back to my freshman year. So again, 3 weeks into the semester, I was a brand new freshman, still getting to know college. I ended up getting, I think, seven or eight interviews with paper companies at Career Fair, which was incredible. And that was thanks to our paper pre-networking night that we hold just for paper companies, which was a really great experience for me. And then from that, I got a couple offers. So I ended up working for Sunoco in South Carolina. I was in Hartsville for the summer right after my freshman year. And that one was recycled paperboard. It was kind of a stereotypical mill role as I understand it. And that was a great experience. I learned so much more than I ever could have expected. And I kind of figured out where I wanted to be within the industry and some things that were important to me in, a next role that I would take on. And so from there, went back to Career Fair my sophomore year. And then I got an internship with Procter & Gamble. So last summer, I worked in Green Bay, Wisconsin with Procter & Gamble, and I got to experience tissue for the first time. So I made Bounty, Charmin, and Puffs all summer in paper making, which was incredible. I had such a great experience, and that's where I'm headed back to tomorrow, actually. So there's IKEA bags all over the house, ready to go to Green Bay, and I will be in converting this summer. So I saw paper making last summer, converting this summer, back with Procter & Gamble, and I am so excited to just see how the two sides work together, kind of get the full scope of the process there, which is very exciting for me.
So that gives us actually the whole spectrum of perspectives. So I think, when Bob described his experience here and Gary as well, and then Madeline, it sounds very similar. So it sounds like Miami still values that rigor. But at the same time, we also provide that liberal arts foundation that prepares our graduates for leadership roles. And we can see that with our alumni here and then with our student who is headed that way. So it's wonderful to see that. I did want to go back again a little and get some of the history. Gary and Bob, you spoke very fondly about some of the professors that you had. Could you reminisce about some of them, because I'd love to hear about them.
Gary, would you like to start?
No, you start, Bob. I'll follow.
I had just so many incredible professors that were so influential in my career, but I just wanted to talk about a couple of them real quick. Dr. Bill Scott, who was the past chair of the department, he was focused on paper making and wet end chemistry, and he was actually working at Champion International when I first met Bill. I started as a co-op, and he actually became my advisor as a co-op student before he joined the faculty at Miami. But he was is incredibly curious, a keen intellect, deep industry knowledge, and an incredibly kind person. And I think really, helped teach me how to work effectively in teams and how to communicate better as well. So Dr. Bill Scott is somebody that I will always remember. Dr. Mike Waller, he was our professor for process control, and Mike is just incredibly smart. He was tough but fair. He really challenged us to think critically, and he really forced us to think about how to apply a lot of the great concepts we were learning in the classroom to real life problems. And he always, I always had the sense that he cared about the students very much. It was more important for him, not the grade. It was more about what we were learning and our ability to apply that very, very well. And then finally, Dr. Chris Peterson, he was past chair of the department as well. Chris, unfortunately, recently passed away this past fall, and he was an incredible steward of the program for many, many years. Again, took a personal interest in all of the students and was really the steward, I would say, of the co-op and internship program. Dr. Peterson was really instrumental in my co-op experience at Miami in terms of organizing that, checking in on me, making sure the experience was going well, and then ultimately helping me ensure full-time employment in the industry. So I've just been was incredibly blessed by all three of these professors being part of my experience at Miami.
And Bob, I'll circle back to Mike Waller. At my time at Miami, there were two professors who are memorable to me because they really forced us to think. It wasn't just a matter of regurgitating what we learned. The homework assignments, the exam problems they gave us forced us to apply the principles. One was Percy Mundell, my organic chemistry professor, and the other was Mike Waller. And I can remember in group projects, we'd be, as students, bantering back and forth about points we didn't understand, and then we had the light bulb moment where the inspiration came and we understood the principle and how it applied to this problem. And those kinds of inspirations are indelibly etched in my brain. I remember where we were all sitting when the light bulb went off in my head, and that's because of the way that he taught. Then the other I'll refer to is Alan Springer. So I agree with everything Bob said, but I'd like also to call attention to Al Springer. He was the professor over environmental issues, and when he left Miami, that's when Kathy Almquist came in. But he also taught heat transfer when he had gone away for a sabbatical somewhere, Africa maybe. He came back and taught heat transfer. And what just impressed me about him is the level of intellectual engagement he demanded of his students. He didn't cut us any slack. He didn't dumb anything down. He taught at a high level, and he expected us to get there. So he challenged us to deliver more than we thought we could deliver. And I'll always appreciate that about those professors. So, all fond memories for all those guys. And on that photograph that was up there before, we had a difficult time locating the photo for Bill Gutzweiler and for Dr. Brandon. But for Dr. Brandon, I was gonna find off the internet a photo of Raymond Burr and put that in there. But fortunately, they found a photo of Dr. Brandon for us in the archives yesterday.
Thank you for those wonderful memories. I heard about Dr. Peterson a lot because he passed this past year. And I remember reading about him, and he just seemed like the professor of professors, right? Like someone who truly valued that. And I won't put Madeline on the spot by asking about her favorite professors, but I will ask about, do you have any favorite classes that you've taken that really helps you with your internships?
Yeah, I have had some really, really enriching experiences. I will say I can give a shout out to Dr. Hone. I really, really enjoyed kinetics last semester. That was definitely a highlight. I loved thermodynamics this semester. That was a surprise. I kind of wasn't sure what to think about it coming in, and I took that with Dr. Paluch. So he is incredible in the CPB department. And of course, I'm eternally grateful for Dr. Keller and all that he's done for me with the paper program. 201 and 301 are intro to paper, and then pulp and paper chemistry. Both difficult courses. Obviously, he expects a lot from us, and it's challenging, and there's a lot to learn. But he is so supportive. He's always available to us. He actually introduced me to some companies my freshman year and said, hey, here's some representatives, go get to know them, do your best, and has been supporting me ever since. So those are some great experiences for sure.
That's wonderful to hear about. And thermo is usually one of the tough classes. And so to hear that you really like it, that's amazing.
Yes, Chemi Thermo too. Surprise favorite.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All of you spoke about the link between industry and the paper science program, right? And then we also have the Paper Science and Engineering Foundation here, which there are very few schools that have that, and we are very lucky and fortunate to have this at Miami. So can you speak about, the role that industry plays in the paper science program, as well as about the Paper Science and Engineering Foundation? And Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you first.
Yeah, it's a rich history of involvement with the industry, and Gary had already highlighted a bit of the partnership, but today we have 38 member companies that are part of it, and we've seen our endowment grow, scholarship endowment grow to over $7 million today. And the focus, of course, is bringing talent into the engineering program and ultimately into the industry, and providing scholarship support for those students that head towards that path. This past year, we had over 60 students that received some form of scholarship help, and it was roughly $265,000. We're continuing to build the foundation through support of the industry overall, as well as support from our alumni as well. We think that pipeline of talent for the industry, particularly what Miami can provide, is incredibly important and valuable to the industry. So the industry representatives, the work of the foundation, Gary can talk a bit about the committees that we have, which are really funded with personnel from the industry that provide input into not only the curriculum, but also the workings of the foundation overall. So I'll turn it over to Gary to elaborate a little bit on that.
Thanks, Bob. In the foundation, we've got a number of people who participate in volunteer roles. I got involved in 1995 because I moved back to the area, and Chris Peterson called and said, "Hey, would you like to come and chair our academic committee?" That's how I got involved, because of the invitation. And likewise, we have many alumni who are involved, but not exclusively alumni, some who work for member companies who staff our committees. We've got 10 committees, 6 of which are active throughout the year. So every 2 months, we do have conference calls between the committee chairs and the executive committee just to review progress being made on initiatives. And then we'll share that later in the day with our board of trustees. So throughout the year, we have activities going on by all these committees of volunteers who are very interested in propagating into the future this partnership between industry and academia. And Beena, you mentioned there are very few schools outside of the paper schools in the United States, of which there are 9. I don't know of any other program that has this kind of industry support through a foundation arrangement. And we're blessed at Miami to have that. And it is truly a partnership. When I was a student, I remember sitting down, being interviewed for a scholarship by 2 members of industry, not by faculty members, not by the foundation executive director, but 2 people from industry who came in to interview students for scholarship awards. And not only did those people award those scholarships to the students, but they also hired them for internships for the summer. And that's work experience, and they ended up hiring them full time. So a student who comes into our paper program, Madeline said it earlier, you feel incredibly supported by faculty, by the foundation, where they're on site, and then by industry people who regularly interact with the foundation activities and with the academics throughout the year. So it really is a partnership, and it's mutually beneficial. Let's face it, the companies want to be part of this foundation so they have access to the students. That's their sustainability of the organic capital for their company, so to speak. and the academic program benefits because they have that infusion of knowledge and what's the latest thing going on in industry that they can then impart to the students, and the students benefit because they're given great opportunities, as Madeline said. So it's a partnership that really works well for all parties involved. And the foundation of our mission is to attract students into the program so that they are the future leaders of the paper companies in the paper industry. And the primary vehicle for doing that, although not exclusively, the primary vehicle are the scholarships that Bob referred to earlier.
I want to add a couple things, but I'm looking at this from a little bit of an outsider. So I've just been in Miami for 2 years now, but Yeah, I'm amazed what the foundation does for us. It's such a strength of the department. Things I hear a lot as chair, as I try to recruit students to come to Miami, is they're all very interested, like, what internships are available, what jobs are our students going to get. And unfortunately, sometimes you hear in the back end, students have graduated and they're like, oh, I didn't feel like the university helped me enough, getting jobs. That's not the case for our paper students in any way, shape, or form. Those students, we've heard that word support. That's a great word. They're supported, from the moment they declare that minor. Gary and Julie Bischoff are going to try to find them jobs and try to find them internships, and have this special career fair, if companies come and looking for that subset of students, and, all the, networking opportunities. It's incredible. And so we're very grateful. And I think Gary has said it well. It's a partnership, and we both benefit.
Madeline, did you want to add anything to the discussion?
Yeah, I can just say that for me personally, the financial aspect is so incredibly helpful. And I feel so fortunate to be supported, not only professionally, and there's all these opportunities for networking and career fair events and things like that, but also the scholarships. I think it's so incredible to be a part of this program and to be supported within it, because it can be a burden for a lot of students, and to know that, that's not something that I have to worry about, that I can graduate and hit the ground running and be so successful and have all these opportunities available to me it's incredible. So I'm really thankful for that.
Hey, Beena,
Yes.
if I can chime in just a second, I've been pinged on my cell phone by Katie Parigi, who was the assistant director of the foundation a couple years ago before she moved on to another position in Miami. And now Julie Bischoff, who is our present assistant director of the foundation. They pinged me, so they're listening today. And it's glad to have them on board, because the foundation wouldn't function without a good assistant director. And Julie right now is doing a great job. And before her, Katie, and before her, Candace Christ. So just understand that behind the scenes, we have some very, very capable people supporting what the foundation does to partner with Miami's academic program.
That is wonderful to hear. And I only know Julie, and I can say that she is an invaluable member of our, college here. And I know that she does a lot along with Gary in supporting the students here. Keith, I wanted to just take, thinking about the future and what you see within the department. Can you talk about some of the new degree programs that you're thinking of, and the future direction of your department?
Yeah, sure. So as far as new degree programs, we're not doing it. Well, the paper science minor I already talked about. That's going to be something new on the paper side. Otherwise, the biomedical side is kind of a growth area for the whole department. So we're expanding into that area. We're adding a clinical engineering program, both at the master's level and as a minor, that's going to basically get our biomedical engineers the opportunity to work in clinics, in hospital settings, and create some new job opportunities for them. As far as our discussion with paper, I mentioned a couple things, and I think Gary might have some slides on this, but we have a new program called SASE. That is basically, there we go. So it's going to train students to deal with process control. So process control has been around a long, long time, but it's only intensifying. More and more things are going to be automated, and our students need to understand how that works and how to handle those technologies. And so we identified that, especially our interns, like we heard from Madeline, she got an internship for freshman year. Her engineering knowledge at that time was probably modest because it just is. You haven't had these classes yet. And she's not alone. And a lot of times those students are going to be placed, they might have to deal with process control. They don't have the background to deal with it. And they might get turned off to process control because they don't understand what they're doing. And so we identified that we could have a program over winter term that our students could take and get trained in it and get just a crash course. They're going to have a detailed process control class later. This is just some hands-on experience, kind of a smattering of the most important concepts, and then they're prepared for their internships. So Doug Coffin kind of directed that administratively. It was really a neat program that we had academic folks. So Doug taught some, Jason Berberick, Giancarlo Corti taught a little bit, and then we had industry folks. So Bill Levendaris, Pat Dixon, Patrick Tessier, and there are probably some other folks as well that were brought in that helped to organize and plan and deliver the content. So you got this academic focus, and you got the industry practical focus, and you got a hands-on focus. And you can see that in some of these pictures. And so we're very excited about that program. It was only paper students last year. We don't think it should be. We think it should be broadened and expanded to lots of other players because all industries are being automated. So we're working very diligently, Doug is, to get more students from mechanical or chemical or any other area that might be doing something, related to process control. So that's a super exciting program. That's part of our efforts to make sure we're modern, make sure we're meeting the needs of the industry. And we've heard that from industry, that's a need. So we want to do that. A couple other things. We've had the pilot paper machine. So if there's any alums out there, you worked with that, probably that machine, but my maybe predecessor. But we have to keep that current. We have to make sure that's still going to provide the experience our students need. Now, it's not the most modern. We know that. It's a pilot. It's small. But we want to make sure it works well. And so we've done a couple of things over the past year with some help from lots of people. We have a vacuum separation system. So the solvent, the water doesn't go through the vacuum pumps anymore. It gets removed prior to that. And that's created a more stable vacuum situation for the instrument. And so we had Ken Miney from APEC kind of coordinated that. We had some work from Pro Services in installation last summer. So that was wonderful. And then we're currently in the purchasing stage to try to change the felt guiding system. So right now it's all manual. Students have to kind of adjust it as the machine's running, and it takes a lot of time and effort. We're going to buy some instrumentation so we don't have to do that manually. I think that's going to be exciting to make it a better experience for the students. So those are two things for the future. The other thing I'll mention is research areas continue to evolve. Doug Coffin has launched new efforts in corrugated. And so he has a project from ABET. I have the title here. Let me pull that title up.
Australian Pulp and Paper Technical Institute.
Thank you. There you go. There you go. So he's got this exciting project with them, and the project is called Development of a Corrugated Box Model for Time-Dependent Scenarios. So he's a mechanics guy, so he's studying the mechanics of corrugated, trying to understand that, develop models, and he's very interested in starting a center on campus, and we're still trying to understand what that would look like, where that would be, but he would like to have a very applied center that could handle these questions, because I think everyone knows corrugated is very, very important, sort of shipping things around. And so yeah, Doug's spearheading efforts in that area.
And Beena, if I could add, what he talked about with SASE represents, perhaps as well as anything, the partnership between industry and academia. Back in 2018, I think it was, the foundation member companies identified the need for better skills on the graduate side for process control and automation. And so Doug Coffin, with the help of us in the foundation, formulated a plan, and it ended up being realized in this first inaugural SASE workshop back in January. So Doug spearheaded that effort, but that was really an industry insight that then the academic side grabbed a hold of and ran with and pulled that together. And we're very excited about the first year, where we had 8 students who are right now beginning their internships for this summer with their sponsoring companies. And as Keith said, we want to grow that, and it needs to grow beyond the paper industry. It's for any manufacturing industry.
And I have been fortunate to get a tour of the pilot paper machine. Gary and Julie arranged that as they were, making those holiday cards. So I remember it's very exciting, and the students were extremely excited to have that hands-on experience. So it is such an invaluable component of our program. And then I think from the day I joined, I heard from Doug as well as from Gary about the SASE workshop and how we need to stand that up. And I'm so glad that we were able to do that. I did want to pivot at this time to some of the questions from the audience because they did have a few questions. And I know the next one is a rather broad one, but for those of you who have been in the paper industry, especially Gary and Bob, and then Madeline, who's working in it now, how have you seen the industry evolve? Like, I know that, we are moving away from the traditional paper products to tissues and boxes and so on. So could you speak about that, please?
Go ahead, Bob.
unmute myself here. Yeah, the industry is evolving, and paper packaging usage has never been higher, actually. So while traditional copy paper that we think about, those applications are certainly in decline. Nobody's reading newspapers anymore, but packaging is now the single largest sector of the industry. Both brown packaging or corrugated packaging, as well as paperboard-based packaging. So think about all of the packaging that's in the retail store. And there's a lot of vibrant growth in that. Tissue, as you mentioned, it is another big area of growth as well as a number of technical papers. So one of the things that is big in the industry is the whole notion of sustainability. And that's because of a big focus on ESG concerns by the major consumer packaged goods companies. And they're really challenging the industry to come up with innovative solutions around material science to be able to replace oil-based materials like plastic. So that is an important growth driver for the industry overall, and I think will continue to drive a good bit of innovation in the industry.
And Bob, I'd like to add to what you're saying there, the changes in the grade structure. When I started out, golly, almost 40 years ago now, big, white, and round was the name of the game. Big rolls, white in color, and round so you can roll them. And that's not the case anymore. Brown is where it's at. Brown or tissue. Big and white and round is a declining market. So the industry has changed in terms of grade structure. Additionally, when I started, it was not uncommon to have 5 or 6 or 7 process engineers in a mill. Nowadays, it might be half that. When Madeline graduates, she's going to go into an environment where she isn't going to have to spend 10 years learning as a process engineer. She might get a year before she's promoted into a management role because A, there are fewer engineers in mills, and B, so many people are retiring these days. So she's going to have great opportunities for her career advancement long before when Bob or I experienced it in our organization. So that's a really changing complexion. And on the sustainability piece, the paper industry is not good, not a good marketer. Okay, years ago, with the environmental concerns and EPA changes in air emissions and effluent discharges were mandated, and the paper industry responded very well, very responsibly. So in addition to taking good care of water and air these days, the industry has always taken good care of their forests, very responsible forestry practices, because if you don't take care of the goose, you won't get the golden egg. So take care of the forest, the raw material is always there, right? So the paper industry has always been responsible in its forestry management practices. And here more recently, and then energy as well, because in pulp mills, the residual cooking liquor, you want the fiber, you don't want the stuff that's in the cooking liquor, but you can concentrate that and burn those organics. So from an energy standpoint, very, very sustainable. So the industry's not marketed itself very well over the years, but that's changing because every company out there today has a sustainability platform as part of the business model. And students these days, Madeline and her fellow students are so much more attuned to sustainability than I ever was as a student. So it's a generational thing, certainly. And the industry, I think, has responded well.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough about sustainability and what this means for the industry going forward. Just having worked with a number of CPG customers around their packaging needs around the world for many, many years, many of these companies talked about sustainability, but it's really just been in the last 3 or 4 years where they really are making a concerted push around being much more efficient about their packaging, and in many cases looking for ways to replace plastic packaging with paper. So I think paper's got a wonderful opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years to really grow and expand.
And in terms of recycled fiber, I remember one of my summer jobs back in the late 70s was in a paper mill that used 100% recycled fiber as its raw material.
Right.
And today in the United States, in 2019, 68% of the paper produced in the United States was recovered and reused. And with all the upset last year with the coronavirus and the lockdown and whatnot, 65% was recovered. Those are substantial numbers, and that's really approaching saturation point. You can't get a whole lot better than that. So the industry really recognizes its responsibilities in terms of fiber stewardship as part of that sustainability platform.
Yeah, it's even higher in brown boxes. So that's over 85% of all of the brown shipping containers, boxes that we see gets recycled within the industry. So a big push on that overall.
Madeline, you were saying something?
I was just going to add. So obviously my perspective is limited with the couple experiences that I've had, but something that even I've noticed over the past couple of years is a really big push for safety. And that was something that was important to me and that was kind of shocking to go into in the industry because I had never been in a mill environment before. I had never seen big machinery like that, besides our pilot paper machine. So I have even seen over the last couple of years, definitely a big push to make sure that all the safety standards are up to date and the newest technology in terms of keeping all employees safe and, anybody who's in the mill.
And from your experience, Madeline, what have you seen on the sustainability and recycling front, especially, I'm sure, with the two different companies that you work for?
Yes. Yeah. So the first company that I worked for was Sunoco. And at that plant, it was mostly recycled, which was really cool to see. They did have some virgin fiber coming in. So I saw the whole, wood yard and the chipper and everything, which is a neat experience. But it was mostly recycled, which was great. Same thing with Procter & Gamble. With Procter & Gamble, they do as much as they can if they have to, scrap rolls or whatever the case may be. It goes right back into the machine. And so there's a constant cycle of just trying to reuse as much material as possible. Same with the water systems. I got a very brief introduction to, their whole water system, which is extremely expansive, as it would be at any plant. But that was really interesting to see as well, just so that, they can always be doing more and there's always new things to adapt and to introduce into the system. So they really were trying to be more sustainable in kind of every aspect that they could be, whether that was with the fiber itself, with the water system, with, pollutants that are coming out, just anything that can be recycled or helping towards the environment. They definitely were making an impact there.
So one question that came in is, what percentage of the corrugated cardboard we use are from recycled fibers? And also same for other paper products.
Bob, you take packaging and I'll take tissue.
Okay, so it's roughly about 40% today of all of the packaging materials are based on recycled fiber. So 60% would be original wood-based packaging, what we call virgin fiber packaging. But you have to have both virgin to be able to create recycled. So they kind of all work together. And within the industry, we talk about recycling roughly about 7 times is what that fiber can be used for. So you always have to have some input of virgin fiber in packaging overall, but it's roughly 40%.
And I would comment too that I was reading an article yesterday about Europe, and many grades of paper in Europe rely on recycled fiber as their natural source of fiber, whereas in the United States, because we have such great forests, we use much more virgin fiber. So it is regionally, the ratios, the percentages will be regionally associated. And I made tissue for 7 or 8 years before I came into this role. And you have to look at the tissue markets in terms of consumer or at-home grades, the kind of stuff you buy off the shelf at the grocery store, versus commercial, versus commercial or away from home. In the away from home market, that's going to be your government offices, that's going to be your universities, that's going to be your recreational facilities, concert halls, sports stadiums, things like that. There's a bit of demand there for a recycled content because some of it's government mandated in those markets. So the paper company I worked for, we made tissue and towel from 100% recycled fiber. Now, the use of recycled fiber is somewhat limited based on the quality characteristics. So the tissue I made out of recycled fiber, you would never mistake for Charmin, okay? People who go to the grocery store don't want to buy recycled fiber. They want to buy that good plush tissue, and that's made out of virgin. So your consumer markets are going to be virgin fiber generally, and your commercial markets are going to have a large part of recycled fiber. So the quality characteristics of the fiber will have generate some limitations of how it can be used.
So Keith, I know you touched on this briefly, but there was a question on what is Miami doing to prepare students for the hands-on mechanical work that is required of a process engineer in the paper industry, and what plans, and you touched on this briefly, are there to leverage one of the program's greatest assets, which is the pilot paper machine.
Right. Yeah. The hands-on stuff we handle a couple ways. The classes, many of the paper science and engineering classes have a lab component to them. So they get to learn making hand sheets and testing the properties, those type of things in that environment. But I really say our senior design is where the rubber meets the road, if you will. And that's where we leverage that paper machine. So Steve Keller runs that. If you're a paper minor, whether from mechanical or chemical, you need to do a project as a senior that's related to paper. And so that project changes year to year. So last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, the semester's over, they had to make a paper with a specific watermark. This year, they had to make a cardboard box. And so, either of those projects, they start from pulp. They have to get pulp from somewhere. We have, of course, lots of contacts and connections that they get the pulp from. They have to figure out what additives to put. They use a paper machine to make it, and then they do other processing. So, of course, for the corrugated, they had to corrugate it. They had to make the different layers. They had to glue it together. They had to, fold it into a box shape. And so it really stretches them out to really take what they have learned and apply it. And so the mechanical things are going to come up there. They're going to have to use the machine. They learn from Doug Hart, our technician, but then eventually he kind of turns them loose and they have to kind of do it themselves. So, I know they were in a lot the last semester making their paper and they're going to have to troubleshoot. They have to learn those things. So that's kind of how we try to teach those practical hands-on mechanical skills.
And I'm going to leave the last word to Madeline. And this question came in on what do students think of the future of the paper industry? What do you hear from your peers, both in the classroom as well as where you work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hear a lot of different things. I think paper is kind of an interesting subject because it's not for every single person, so some people will come into the program and they try it out and it's not their favorite thing, or there's, some parts that aren't quite as attractive to them, and that's okay, because there's plenty of students who really love it and who thrive. And so I hear some different things. I think a lot of people are really excited about that sustainability aspect, and that there's a big opportunity to make an impact on the environment and, be a part of something bigger than themselves. I think people right now are especially interested in job security because, you have to be. If you're graduating and there's a program that's available to you that can almost guarantee you a position, I think that's very attractive to a lot of people. Other than that, I think, people have said, including myself, that it's a rigorous program and that it's challenging but very rewarding. And so you learn a lot, you cover a lot in your paper courses and in that curriculum. So if you're willing to, think about different industries and different applications other than, something that you had your heart set on, for example, like if you came into engineering and you really wanted to manufacture cars, obviously paper isn't going to be for you. But, if you're flexible and you're willing to work on some different mediums, such as paper, I think it's a great place to be. And a lot of people are very excited to be there and excited to see where it goes. Also, even in terms of leadership opportunities, like Gary was talking about, just there's a lot of opportunity to jump right into a role and become a leader and, have a team working with you and by your side, which is also incredible experience for somebody coming right out of college or even not graduated from college yet. So.
So I do want to thank this team for taking the time today. It's been, I think when you're having fun and discussing something that you love, the time just flies by. I didn't even realize how time had flown by, but I did learn a lot from every one of you about how the program started, where it is now, and what we can look forward to. I think is a very bright future for the paper science and engineering industry. And I know that I have a husband who has a PhD in paper science, so he didn't go into that, but I know that it has an incredibly bright future. So I'm looking forward to seeing many more years of a very successful paper science program and paper engineering program here at Miami. And also, thank you very much to the Paper Science and Engineering Foundation for supporting our students, for supporting our college over the years. And, thank you all for participating.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Well,
Beena.
Thank you all for joining us. I have to agree with Beena when I say time really flew, and I am surprisingly interested in paper science now. I really did not anticipate that, but you all make it sound like a really excellent environment, not only for learning, but for sort of, really moving forward in one's career path. So kudos to you all for making it sound like a really good option and choice for our students. And I just want to say and underscore what you all were talking about such a supportive environment. A couple folks chimed in with some comments about their experiences with the faculty within paper science, and many of those were lifelong relationships with folks, and it's pretty clear that faculty had their finger on the pulse of what happens with their students after the fact. And of course, Madeline, I would be remiss if I didn't say that Katie Parigi, actually formerly of the foundation, left a comment saying how entirely proud of you she is. And I have to say, I agree with her. And I said this the last time about the last engineering student. You all are tragically impressive and much more serious students than I am a serious adult. So kudos to you. Great job. Wish you all the success in your internship this summer. Thank you all for joining us today. I just want to remind you that there will be a recording of this presentation on our website available later today. Thank you again to Dr. Sukumaran, Keith Hone, Gary Rudemiller, Bob Fieser, and Madeline Holthouse for the really great conversation today. We appreciate you being here. Please check out our other webinar presentations at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. And thank you again for joining us. Love and honor to you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.